We're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Stripe Dev Chats, where we love to talk about all the cool things that are happening around the world in Stripe and also in the development community. My name is Celso Phillip, and today we're going to be learning about something really cool, something that I don't know a lot about, and hopefully you don't know a lot about, but we'll all kind of learn together and we'll see how it goes. So before we kind of dive into our topic and we, introduce our guests, I want to first introduce my co-host CJ. So CJ is joining me for the first time today. I really appreciate you stepping in and kind of helping out. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself really quick and let folks know who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, happy to be here. Cecil, you've been doing a great job with these dev chats. So stoked to jump on. I'm CJ Avila, developer advocate at Stripe. And yeah, excited to learn more about Begin and Deno stuff. Sorry to scoop the topic there.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So like you said, we're going to be learning about Begin, which is an interesting new serverless platform, and also how we could use Deno, which from my understanding is like a new JavaScript runtime that we could use to start building some of these serverless applications. And to kind of kick us off, we have two of these folks here from Begin. We have Brian and we have Simon, and they're going to talk to us about pretty much how everything works. So why don't we have you all introduce yourself? Brian, why don't we start with you, and then we can go to Simon. And then we can kind of just dive into it.
Sure. Hi, I'm Brian. I'm a co-founder of Begin and maintainer of Architect, arc.codes, which is the sort of underpinning of Begin. Begin's a platform for building functional web apps. Sometimes people will call serverless. Serverless is more of an ethos, whereas functional web apps are more about cloud functions code. And I'm also the maintainer of our Deno runtime for AWS.
And Simon, your turn.
And I'm Simon McDonald, the head of developer experience at Begin, and you can see all the wonderful things that Brian does. So that doesn't leave me with very much left, which is it's a pretty good job if you can get it. I got to tell you. No, I handle way too many wrangling of cats at Begin, but I'm enjoying every last minute of it.
That's awesome. Now, like we do every show, before we actually dive into the main topic, I do have some links I want to share. Just to share some quick updates and again, let folks know what has been going on. So really quickly, I'm going to pull up my screen and why don't we go ahead and go through some of these links super quick. And I'm definitely not at the top. So here we go. So the first link I want to share with you. So Stripe Connect attends, and this was published on April 28th. So just a couple of days ago. Now, Stripe Connect is a product that we have that allows us to create like marketplace type experiences. And as you can see here, we've been doing it for 10 years now. So for 10 years, we've been able to enable this experience for a lot of different folks and companies. And so we definitely appreciate all of you all that have been, joining us and working with us and like helping us kind of, helping us build out this really great experience. CJ, you want to tell folks a little bit in like 10 seconds, like what is Connect? Like what is Connect for? Like what do people do with it?
Sure. Yeah. Stripe Connect is the Stripe product that you would use to build a marketplace or a platform. So if you think about companies like Lyft, where they're facilitating payments between a rider and a driver, the driver would become what's called a connected account. And that is a way that you sort of associate this business entity that is the driver with the platform that is Lyft. And then you can sort of accept payments from all these riders and make sure that the drivers are being paid out. Similarly, if you're building an e-commerce platform like Shopify, you can enable vendors to set up these shops and receive payment. This is all done through Stripe Connect, which sort of allows you to build these third-party marketplaces where you can facilitate payments.
So you're saying if I wanted to sell NFTs,
oh my God.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it alone.
yeah.
I'm gonna leave it alone.
Please
don't. Saying, if I wanted to create marketplaces, so let's say I had, other folks that were selling recipes or renting cars or whatever the case is, and I wanted to sell it through my platform.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I could essentially have like some type of onboarding experience where they could sign up and, all of the payments will get processed through my platform and then forwarded on along to those other folks that are actually providing the service, right?
Yep, that's right. And there's technically like if you want, you can also just use it purely for payouts. So you could set it up so that all you're doing is facilitating payment on the payout side, and then you're accepting payment some other way. But Stripe Connect is It's also sort of the backbone for Stripe Treasury, which is this new banking as a service where you can embed banking and create neobank type services as part of your offering. So I think Stripe Connect is going to become an even more fundamental part of these really amazing, powerful tech products over the next few years. So
awesome.
I can't believe it's been a decade.
I know, yeah.
It's been a long time. It has. Yeah. All right, so let's move forward to the next link. So we're going to be having a developer office hours in 5 days, right? So that'll be on May 10th. And CJ, you're going to be talking about how to get started with Link, right?
Yeah, so Link is a really interesting new payment method type that allows you to give your customers a faster checkout. Essentially, they can sort of save their payment details for later and enables essentially one-click checkout through your own hosted form. So this is already possible to checkout like Stripe checkout today. But if you're using the payment element and you're building your own custom forms, we have this offering coming soon where the customer will be sort of prompted to enter a one-time PIN that they receive on their phone. So they put their email address in, they'll get texted a thing, they can put in a PIN, and that will preload all their previous payment method types, their address, and all of that. So they can just do one-click checkout directly through your site. So we'll build a full end-to-end demo next week. So it should be pretty exciting.
Nice. And then the last thing I want to share with folks. So a lot of people might not know this, but we actually have like I guess we can call it like a dev.to organization for Stripe. So a lot of our developer advocates and some other folks, write blog posts and different articles, and then we post it over there, once or twice a week or so. And so this one is from our teammate Matt Ling, who posted a recent post that talks about how you can get started with the Stripe shell. And for folks that may not know this, if you go into our documentation, there's actually a secret command that you can hit on your keyboard that will actually pop up a command line terminal inside of your browser. And it'll have the Stripe CLI and some other really interesting tools that you could use to start interacting with, your Stripe account, like the account that you're actually logged in. So again, this blog post has a video here that you could watch if you wanted to, but it also kind of goes through the steps of showing you how you can invoke the actual Stripe cell inside of your browser. And then
I feel like we have to do
some of
it.
the things you could do.
I feel like we have to do it, Cecil.
You want to do it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Is it like the Doom? Like
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. So, all right. I feel like I have to be signed in. Do I have to be signed in?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Let's do it and not sign in. This is
Okay.
gonna be like an experiment because I have never done it and not sign in.
Okay.
I want to click on this accept to payment thing, maybe, and I'm gonna hit Control tilde.
Yeah.
And here you have at the bottom. Here's a Stripe shell, right? And if I wanted to, so I could do things like Stripe status. Oh, it did some stuff. Command is only supported by local install. Okay, I guess I can't use that command. If I do maybe Stripe account, it looks like it does like autocomplete for me. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Maybe Stripe customer create.
You must log in.
You have to
so
log
you
in.
must log in. All right. I'm going to move this to the side. I'm going to log in really quick. And then hopefully after I log in, it'll let me play around with some stuff. See, this is how you know things are live, because this is when you start moving around browsers and things of that nature. Then
Yeah. Hey, Steve,
this was
thanks
definitely
for
not
joining.
planned.
Yeah. Yoko said, yes, do it. So we've got to do it. I know you're logging in over there, so we're going to.
Okay.
Thanks a
All
ton
right,
for watching. All right. So you're
So there you
logged
go.
in.
I've logged into the thing. I don't know if I have to restart this now, but let's do that. Okay. Now I'll do Stripe accounts. And notice as I'm typing, it's like telling me stuff that I could do, right? So accounts is like the noun, right? And then now we're seeing like those different verbs that you can execute against the noun, right? So there's retrieve, update, list, delete. I'm not going to delete anything because I think that's a bad idea. But I will list stuff, and then I'm sure what you'll see is, here you go. I have 10 items inside of here. Now, I'm not going to show you all what accounts I have because I don't want to show you all my information. But just know that it's there, as you can see. What else do we have, CJ? I can show you payment links.
Yeah. I mean, Stripe customers create. Let's make a customer.
You want to make a customer?
Or yeah. Stripe customers create.
All right. CJ's going to make me do this. Stripe customer. Notice how they're all pluralized. So they'll let you know when you're not mixing stuff. So create.
Yep. And that's all you really need is
stuff I could do.
You could do like dash email and or set a name. Yeah.
Email. Whatever. Right. And do I have to do like this?
Sure.
cecil@don'temailme.com.
Yeah.
Can I do
So
that?
this is, yeah, what's really cool about this is that it brings the Stripe CLI directly into the docs, so you can play around with the API just like as you're testing stuff out. So yeah, type ahead, not just tab complete. And then I think you can also click on those drop down things and they are links. So like,
This?
wow.
Oh wow! Look at that.
yeah,
That's cool.
boom.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Balance. I'm guessing I just give this a number.
Yeah. I mean,
I
you don't
have
have to pass. Yeah. Like, yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
have like so
probably-
much money.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Pack that
Oh,
account.
All
that's,
the money.
yeah. There's
Right.
definitely a limit there.
So if I run this, what's gonna happen? Let's see what happens. Error. So I'm gonna guess that I need stuff, right? Am I missing something? Amount must be no more than, oh, I have too much money. So
yeah,
that's
too
the
much
problem.
money.
Stripe does not like when you have too much money.
Yeah.
But here's one thing I want you to notice too. Because it's inside of the browser, it doesn't mean that you can't do some of those normal commands that you're used to. So if you notice, I could do Stripe, and I hit the up arrow, and notice it just like auto completes, just like you would have if you're inside of Z Shell or Bash or one of those other things. And I can come back, I can edit this. I'm gonna make myself a little bit poorer. And there you go, right? So we've gone ahead and we created a new Stripe account, which is really cool. Now, here's the ID for the account. I'm guessing if I click on this, what it's going to do is going to go over to the account that I was signed into. That's not what you're supposed to say. But anyway. That's not
live demos.
But anyway, what I'm saying is that whatever account that you signed into, it'll go ahead and it'll create this Stripe account. And if you wanted to, I think you can click on this thing and you could switch the accounts that you're in.
Yep.
So for instance, right now I'm in that one. I can go to my CP test account. Oh, I gotta sign in again. Anyway, y'all get the point. You can go in here and you could use the Stripe CLI. You can start playing around with it and doing a lot of cool stuff inside of the docs.
That's great.
So hopefully folks try it out. Definitely love to hear what you think about it. I don't know what else is in here. I know the CLI is in here. Do we have like curl and stuff in here? Can I curl stuff? No, I can't curl.
No, yeah, it's like obviously like just the Stripe stuff that
you have wget. I don't have wget. Do I have ls? I have ls. Okay. ls. Can I cd into quick start?
I don't think so. Oh, if you cd ... maybe it goes
cd
to
ls.
Oh, look at the docs move around.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
And we have samples. So awesome is that, right? So we can kind of navigate through the world of documentation pretty much, and kind of see what some of the cool things that we could play around with inside of the Stripe, inside of the Stripe shell, inside of our docs. So that's awesome.
Cool.
And Steve is saying, beware of the demo gods. Yes, I did not make a demo god offering. I apologize. Next time I'll sacrifice like some PHP or something, and then all will be good. All right. So that being said, that's all the links that I wanted to share today. I'm going to take my screen off, and this is like the point of the show where I say, hey, this is no longer, this is no longer about us, but this is our guest show, and I think it's time that we begin talking about Begin. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So
yeah.
So I think Brian, why don't we start off with you, right? Tell us like what exactly is Begin? Like, why does it exist? Why is it here? What does it do for us?
Yeah, so when we started building with AWS a few years ago, we found it a little bit challenging, and we loved the story of serverless, and the whole idea of serverless is about outsourcing. So there's a lot of stuff that we could build and do. Back in the day, I used to literally physically mount server racks and plug in Ethernet cables, and we don't do that anymore. We obviously go to the cloud, and so the logical conclusion of the cloud would be that we outsource compute entirely. The ideal would be that we outsource compute to the point where I'm only paying for it by the millisecond. And the primitive for that that kind of kicked all that off was Lambda in 2014. And Amazon is very famously a very large surface area to work with, and they're always growing, and it's always getting more and more complicated. So we created an open source project called Architect, and you can find that at arc.codes for kind of wrangling these primitives. And we quickly kind of realized that we want to build a very specific kind of application. We call those applications functional web apps. The idea of a functional web app is that we're focused on building the cloud functions, and we're using a managed database, and we're deploying with infrastructure as code. And Begin is a platform that lets you do that by just signing in with your GitHub. So instead of trying to like deal with figuring out even how to get started with Amazon, which is a fairly daunting task, you can just click sign in with GitHub and create an app within like 30 seconds. And that's really the story with Begin. We want to drop that time down to iteration, down to seconds. And we only want to focus on business logic. So we just want to write cloud functions. I think that kind of covers the sort of the Begin backgrounder.
Yeah. Is Architect, because I'm guessing Architect is like the thing that like Begin sits on top of. Is Architect solely for AWS, or can I look at this as a thing that I can run across different clouds and even, you know, locally on my own infrastructure if I wanted to?
It works locally. People have made attempts at ports to other clouds, although there's nothing that's been officially merged. We've done some light work exploring different cloud functions providers like Cloudflare or Azure Functions. But they're really not, the space hasn't commodified to the point that we could abstract over them and have a consistent interface yet. And they have just too different a semantics between them. And actually, this dovetails nicely talking about Deno because they have their own cloud functions thing now too. But a Deno function really isn't anything like a Lambda function. And a Lambda function really isn't anything like an Azure function or a GCP Firebase function. I think that will change over time. I think right now we're kind of in this early moment where we're figuring out what does this mean when we get rid of the server metaphor, and everybody's mixing it up and trying different things, and that's good. Like we want that, you know, diversity, but at some point it'll probably start to consolidate. And my guess is that we're going to see that consolidation approach something more like Lambda. They are just so far ahead. You know, AWS did that in 2014. I think the next nearest provider was Azure, and that was like 20.
Yeah.
I want to say 18 or 19. Like, yeah. So we have a lot of years of fun ahead of us.
Right. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. And that being said, if anybody's listening from any of the non-AWS clouds, you know, pull requests welcome. We would love for you to come work with us on that. Yeah.
Yeah. The big difference for me, like Azure and GCP are both kind of based on containers, and they're more around longer lived workloads. And so you start a container and then you write functions, but they run inside this container. Lambda functions are a brand new abstraction on what's called a micro VM. It's not a container. It's based on a thing called AWS Firecracker, which is open source. These micro VMs start up, execute, and go away. They are completely stateless. And this is a huge operational difference. So you can scale out to like thousands of worker threads in literal seconds, whereas starting and stopping a container is typically quite slow. And that's the sort of dreaded cold start. So the other clouds are sort of getting around this dreaded cold start by having a container running that's warm, accepting multiple requests, but it's not truly stateless. So that semantic difference actually makes a huge difference down the road for both performance and security. And so I feel personally that the future is going to belong to stateless horizontal auto scaling. That's how it's always worked. That's probably how it'll continue to work, but the other clouds just aren't there yet. With the exception of Cloudflare, I should say. They do have their own kind of idea around this, but it's based on V8 isolates, which is a tiny slice of the V8 runtime. And that's great because it's JavaScript and we love JavaScript, but it kind of sucks because it's not Unix. And you can't do all the stuff that you can do with Unix. You can only do the stuff that you can do with V8, which is very limited at the moment. Sorry, that was a lot of words.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And actually, talking about Cloudflare, we actually had Luke Edwards from Cloudflare come on to talk to us about workers and pages. So for folks that are watching, you know, you could head over to the Stripe developers YouTube page. You can kind of, you know, go backwards in time and like check out that old episode if you wanted to. So here's one of the things that I always wonder about when I think about serverless. Because usually serverless things are always like tied to a platform. As much as folks like to say, oh, we can move it around, like to really get like the benefits of all the things, like you really have to be attached to like a thing, right? Like whether it's Azure or AWS or whatever the case is. So with Begin, how much integration does it have outside of Lambda functions? Like, can I plug into SQS or SES or some of those other what's those things called, like storage or any of those other services that AWS has in a very like intuitive way?
Yeah, so Architect, the open source underpinning, lets you take any Begin. You can take any Begin app and run it on your own Amazon. First of all, so we're not locking you into our platform. We're more of a deployment tool than we are a platform. The Architect project has this concept called plugins. Those allow you to modify the generated cloud formation, so you can muck about with any of the AWS primitives you want. We've actually been around for a while now. We shipped Architect initially in 2017, believe it or not. So over the prevailing years, we've fleshed it out pretty good. I would be surprised if there was a capability we didn't already have a plugin for or couldn't do. There is edgy stuff in there. Like, we don't really do much with like the suite of services around machine learning, for example. Architect and Begin are really concerned with building dynamic web applications. So that's kind of the bread and butter. But yeah, we support SQS, SES, SNS, all the 3-letter acronyms you can think of.
Right.
We try and hide that though and let you focus on your business logic. That's kind of our thing.
Yeah, it's not just the AWS Lambda layer. You can use S3, queues, events, tables, streams, all that sort of stuff with Architect. That the main benefit from a developer experience point of view is you don't drop yourself in the AWS console and have to make 140 decisions. You have some sensible defaults to get you going.
Yeah, and this decision fatigue is not a problem that's going to go away. Amazon is kind of an incredible organization. They just keep adding stuff, and like they do it to the point where they're competing with themselves in some of their products, and like it's almost bizarre. So it's a real big elephant to kind of tackle. You just got to chew it one bite at a time. But like if you use Architect, it's a fast forward button. You're going to be on all the serverless stuff like in seconds.
It's bizarre, but it's also comforting because whatever they introduce today is going to be there 10 years from now because they're never taking anything away. They're just going to keep adding and adding. Nothing's going to break. So you have confidence that whatever you pick, you'll be able to keep using for a very long time.
Yeah, and on that note, actually, I'd say of the companies that I admire for how they do their APIs, it would be Stripe and Amazon. There's really good formal backwards compatibility. I feel extremely safe writing code for these platforms because I know you're not going to pull the rug on me and change stuff. Amazon does this to the point, though, where it's almost like ugly. So if you look at their oldest APIs, S3, or I think it's the second oldest maybe, there's a whole bunch of functions in there that are just postfixed V2, V3, like you can like put object V2, and like it looks gross, and like everybody who initially encounters this is like, oh, that's bad. But I challenge you to think for a second, actually, how great that is, because that means you write your code and you know that's going to run forever on their platform, and that's a big deal because I don't need unplanned work due to aesthetic concerns.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we've been talking about Begin for a little bit. I'd love to see, like, what does it actually feel like from a developer perspective to actually create a new Begin application? Like,
I'd
love to see that.
So I'm going to share my screen.
Awesome.
I hope.
And then while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and I'll ask Simon a question too. So kind of just looking at Architect, and as you were talking, I was clicking around a little bit on the website. I'm going to guess that Architect is specific for JavaScript. Like, are there other languages that can run with Architect, or is this only like?
No, you can run JavaScript is kind of what we use most days, but you can use Ruby or Python with Architect as well. There's no reason why you couldn't use those as well. Our SDKs support those as like first-class citizens. So
awesome.
Yeah, all the dynamic languages. I'm a big fan of Ruby, and we have, of course, what I'm calling experimental support for Deno today. Okay,
cool. So why don't we take a look? Like, how do I want to write a serverless thing like right now? Like, how do I do it?
Okay. All right. So I'm at begin.com. I'm going to log in with my GitHub. It's going to do the OAuth dance, and it's going to redirect me around. So this is my sort of like app console page. And
It's like
most
those
of
are all the apps that you created before, and then now you're going to go create a new one.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always creating messes in here, so don't. At least there's no swear words. So most of our examples are very Node.js centric, but if you click on this Deno tab, we do actually have a couple. I'm just going to do hello world, and I'm going to pray to the demo gods are on my side today. I'm saying demo gods, please work. We'll just...
I did make an offering before the call, so we should be okay.
So this is doing a whole bunch of stuff in the background. It's in a queue right now. Oh, so it created this repo for me in GitHub, and it flushed some code in there. And I know that because this event kicked off. By the way, Begin is a serverless app. This is all built and deployed with itself, which is
it's a serverless app that you use to build serverless apps.
Yes. Yeah. And this
it's
is
Matryoshka dolls all the way down.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's cloud functions all the way through. So sometimes people ask, can you do like real-timey stuff? And yeah, I mean, this is WebSockets. And if I pop open my console, we might even see those sockets. Oh, I can't because it already built. All right, well, we'll go look at that. So it just built like a silly hello world, nothing too big. And you could kind of feel the cold start there. But I'm going to go edit that on GitHub. And there's this, this disturbs people sometimes, but sometimes we'll just return a string of HTML, like wild animals. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to do something kind of funny. I'm going to be like, let's say Deno version. And we'll just do this as a test. So, Deno, first thing to know is this is a TypeScript file. So Deno supports TypeScript by default, which is kind of nice. You don't have a build step. You just, treat it like you do. And it's got this global where you can get the versions of everything on it. So I'll commit that. I'll pop over here. The webhook fired. A WebSocket event happened. Right now, this is just streaming data back into the Begin build system. It's typically the worst step is npm install, but if you're running Deno, you don't have that problem. And now it's in the deployment queue, and it'll pump that function at some point in the next few seconds up to its final destination on our staging stack.
Nice.
But by default, we have a convention where commits to main will go to staging, and then git tags go to production. So if I click on that, you can see now that it's returning that I've got Deno 1.2.1, and I've got this version of V8 and this version of TypeScript.
Nice.
And yeah, that's kind of it, actually. That's all it really takes to get going with Deno. I've got my repo set up. There's obviously a ton of stuff that we can do in here that's like, above and beyond what's going on, but that's the sort of baseline. And then if you want to try it out locally and you don't want to give me your GitHub credentials, that's totally cool too. I've got this thing called Architect installed, which I got by npm ig architect. Oh, wow. Typing on a pillow right now. Okay, so I'm going to make a directory and I'm going to just call it like Deno is cool. We'll jump into Deno is cool. And I'll run archinet. Runtime equals Deno. And I actually have a bug in here. So that worked and that's all cool. But the bug is, by default, we are right now encouraging people to go on ARM64. But my Deno builds are only working on x86. So I'm going to delete that from the configuration. And then it's just this one file, and it's rendering some HTML. I'll run arc sandbox. And so Architect is an open source project for building serverless apps, and all the Begin apps that we deploy are based on Architect. And one of the big features of Architect is that we emulate out all of the services on Amazon locally. So you don't have to deploy this to AWS in order to see it working. you can just run it locally, and Bob's your uncle.
So that's perfect for like a lot of those scenarios where we talk about, hey, I want to build an application, I want to use the cloud, but like there's no local cloud, right? And I'm on an airplane, or I'm at the park, or in wherever, and I'm not connected to Wi-Fi or an Ethernet cable. How do I do work, right? And so what you're saying is that you're able to emulate some of these things to make it a little bit easier for us to kind of keep going.
Exactly. It's so important. I think there's been a bit of a myth in the serverless world that you can't work locally, and that's just not true. Is it hard to work locally? It's harder, actually, with a traditional 3-tier monolith, in my view.
Yeah.
And you don't load test your 3-tier monolith locally. You deploy that to a staging environment to load test it. You just want to preview stuff, or maybe you want to add a route and see if it worked, or check out a payload, or run the unit tests. And
Right.
That's what the local dev environment's really all about. And I think Architect is unique in this way. I think we're the only ones that support a local dev environment, and then the other frameworks say it's impossible, which is for them. Maybe it is. But I've found that Amazon is very stable.
Yeah.
Like I said, they don't change APIs, and we've been around for 5 years. So like when we encounter a new thing, we'll definitely add it. But it's a compounding value, once you start investing in that local experience, and it really does pay off.
Awesome.
Now, I just want to point out one thing before we move on. Like that app that Brian created in the Begin UI, he could do a Git clone of that on his local system and then start building locally. You don't actually have to start with the npm init command from Arc.
Yeah, that's true too. And all of this stuff is open source, and you can run on your own Amazon account. You don't need us. Actually, one other thing I should share that I think is semi-relevant to this audience's interests. If you want to get going with Deno, this is another thing. I think it's Deno. Sorry, I should have brought this up sooner. I say Deno also all the time, but we open sourced our Lambda layer, and if you want to run your own Lambda with Deno, all you need to do is copy and paste this into your own CloudFormation. And we keep this pretty in sync with them, and we've been on this for quite a while now. And it's basically our vibes there.
So let's head over to the chat really quick, because it looks like we have a couple of comments and questions that folks have kind of chimed in with.
Steve is correctly pointed out it's Deno.
It is Deno. So we had this conversation yesterday in a meeting, and I was like, I think it's Deno. And I think CJ, you might have said, I think it's Deno. And I'm like, we're going to ask on the stream today, and we're going to find out the right thing. So we can start.
They changed it, man. So Ryan, when he first presented it, like forever ago, it was in 2018, was calling it Deno. And then I think somebody convinced him it should be Deno, because it's like a little dinosaur guy. And so the official pronunciation is Deno.
Is Deno. Okay. So the spelling didn't change, but they just decided to change like the phonetics of it. Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
I mean, as a Canadian, you'll catch me saying JavaScript sometimes instead of JavaScript. So like,
that's funny.
It's like an accent.
We also have Edward. Edward is coming in from YouTube, and he's asking, what are the benefits of using Deno?
That's a very good question.
I almost said Deno again. What are the benefits of using Deno versus Node versus Rust for serverless functions? I have opinions on that, but I'll let you all chime in first.
So this is, I mean, not exactly apples and oranges. Rust is incredible. You're going to write a lot of characters for not a lot of functionality, but you're going to get incredible performance. So I would treat Rust like that last knife in my boot when I really needed to like eke out every last little bit of perf. But you probably don't need it. Now, Deno versus Node is a apples and apples question. That's a good one, and it's a tough one because I am obviously extremely exuberant about the future for Deno. I don't think it's quite there yet. They're still iterating on it. It's only recently 1.0. It is 1.0 and it's fairly stable, but there's still things changing about it, and the ecosystem's still coming together. They really only recently have had the ability to run a lot of common JavaScript libraries, and they are working on a Node compatibility layer. But I think your best bet right now is put your production workloads on Node and keep a hairy eyeball on Deno. And we'll probably be using both for quite a while. As developers, we like to think that we're going to have, one language to rule them all, but truly it's a good thing to have more than one runtime. And,
do you want to comment on the cold start difference between Deno and Node?
That's true too. So Node is not getting faster, and Deno is, and Deno's screaming fast. Currently, Deno is living in a Lambda layer, though, in our world, and that Lambda layer has a penalty, and so they're very comparable. But if and when, I should say, Amazon decides to go fully native runtime, managed runtime support for Deno, it's going to smoke Node. I think it starts in like 20 milliseconds, as opposed to Node, which the fastest I've seen at cold start is 50 milliseconds. So we're talking about 30 milliseconds here, though. I mean, like.
So, like, I'm curious too. Like, I know that earlier you were talking about isolates. I'm like, what is it, like isolate versus this firecracker thing? And like, can you do isolates like just with Node? When I heard about isolates the first time, it was like just from like Deno deploy type stuff. And so I'm like, can you help us understand your perspective on that?
So, isolates are a like sandbox primitive built inside of the V8 runtime. And so they are a way to run a language thread. V8's pretty convinced that is completely isolated. I don't know with Heartbleed and Spectre if I believe them, to be frank. I don't know if they can do that. And I'm sure it would be very hard, but I'm not entirely certain. So you're running in a shared space. Now, the language is the virtual machine of that shared space. And so in theory, this is impossible to break out of that sandbox. But I don't know, theories are good. Practice is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Now, the Firecracker VM is a different story. It's a virtual machine. It's a full POSIX environment. It's an entire Linux operating system running in like a KVM space. And so it is completely demarcated. Yeah, so it's actually isolated, I guess. so isolates are probably isolated, whereas I would say Firecracker, you have a much stronger guarantee of isolation.
And then and you can run JavaScript, like you can run Node in isolates, or you can run Deno in isolates, or
no. So I think Deno deploy is based on isolates.
Mm-hmm.
But really, isolates are a language level thing. All this POSIX,
got it.
File systems and IO and network and all that is actually happening outside of that. And so, they're different worlds entirely.
Got it. Okay.
And that's kind of the downside of this isolates thing, is that you're sort of stuck in the JavaScript world. People will say WASM solves that, but no one's demonstrated it to solve it yet. So
got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So let's like make the cold start problem go away, and then we can just use the Lambda stuff.
I think, and the cold start thing is a bit of a red herring these days. Like we do see like around 100, 200 millisecond cold starts. It's not that bad. And it does keep dropping. And this is just industrialization, doing its thing. Stuff's getting used more, so it gets faster, smaller, cheaper with time.
Yeah. Okay. And the last comment I want to get to inside of the chatter really quick before we move on. So Steve McCardle. So Steve is here every week. So I always try and shout out Steve, because I really appreciate Steve coming in every week with all like questions and comments and all of that type of stuff. And so Steve's asking, can I get a VS Code plugin for that? Now, I don't know what your roadmap looks like, or I don't know if there's a community thing that's already in existence that's happening, but could you shed some light on this for really quickly?
I'm a Vim guy. So Simon, I know we have some of this in the community.
Yeah, we do have.
I have low standards, so I'm the wrong one to ask about this.
Yeah, Brian learned Vim 20 years ago, and he hasn't learned anything new since, which is, he's using his brain cycles on other things. But yes, we do have a VS Code plugin. Right now, for the most part, it just does syntax highlighting of architect files. So instead of having to write, say, 1,700 lines of CloudFormation, you can write 14 lines of an arc file. and we decided to syntax highlight it because, everybody has that. But definitely this is something that we want to add some additional capabilities to, so that you can deploy using the VS Code plugin as well. For folks love VS Code, so any way we can help there would be awesome.
Actually, can I demonstrate that?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
probably.
Let me just, I'm not going to show the highlighting, but I want to show the thing that Simon pointed out, because it's actually shocking, and it's, sometimes I think this should just be our homepage. So if you go to arc.codes, you can see all of the horrifying Amazon setup that you have to do. But if you go to arc.codes/playground, you can see why you might care. And so I don't know if you guys can see this, but on the left, this is the configuration file for Architect. And it's, I'm declaring I'm going to have an app named My App. I want an API gateway that responds to, let's blow this open actually, any star. So if any request comes in, I'm going to have a Lambda function handle it. And then on the right here is the generated cloud formation for doing that. Now, some people claim you can write this by hand. I think those people are lying, because this would take a ton of work.
You could write it by hand, but do you want to write it by hand? That's a different question.
I mean, like,
I definitely do not want to write that by hand.
Or debug it. So yeah, Architect in many ways is really just a compiler, where we're taking this high level manifest format and we're compiling it down into native cloud formation. And that's why. That's, what you probably want to do is focus on building your app, not learning this insane.
I have like language. A wild question and like a wild idea. I know like it's like you're taking this Architect file and you're building out these Lambda function CloudFormation things. Have you ever considered like taking an Architect file and spitting out like a Rails app that has Okay.
Yeah. So, well, another thing we've tried too is running our sandbox inside of a container and then deploying that to Heroku. It worked. Okay. It was slow, but it worked.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's actually a really great project out there, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but someone has done this. So this actually exists, and it kind of works. So recently, AWS expanded your temp disk in a Lambda to 10 gigabytes. And you can back it with a Docker container up to 10 gigabytes. So like you can build a lot of app in one Lambda function. I don't know what the cold start's like on those.
Yeah,
it's probably not very good. We've correlated cold start roughly to how much code you're loading. So you kind of want to keep these functions small. But can you put a Rails app into a Lambda function? You can. Do you want to? Probably not. But,
yeah.
It's worth checking out though, and I know it's out there.
Yeah, we definitely have tutorials where you take an already running Express application, wrapping it in a Lambda, and then slowly decomposing it into multiple functions. And then at the end, your Express app goes away and you're left with an API gateway with a bunch of functions.
And that's a good place to be. And that's actually how we got into this ourselves. I think everybody's first inclination with Lambda is I'll throw an Express server in there.
Yeah. And
then it will work. It'll totally work great. And then you add more and more code and it gets slower and slower, and life gets harder and harder. So this is the ultimate way, is to split these up into small constituent parts and then have them all deploy independently.
So one more question. I was actually going to ask this question, but Steve beat me to it. And so I want to give him credit for it. And the question is, what have you found the ramp up speed for first-time Architect users to be?
Yeah, pretty quick. I mean, we have no dependencies. So you need Node, and then you can get going. If you want to deploy to AWS, that time goes up significantly. And I recommend joining our Discord to get a hand with the community. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat this. Amazon's a big beast. And you got to give them, once you get them your credit card, there's still a whole bunch of hoops you have to jump to get set up. I think you need 2 versions of Python. You need to have AWS CLI. There's just a whole bunch of wrangling to do. And this is another reason for the local development experience. We don't want that to be a barrier for you to get started. And another reason to use Begin instead of using Amazon. but we're not here to lock you in or anything like that. So yeah, real fast to get started, maybe fast to deploy if you use Begin. I've been using Amazon for almost a decade now, and I still am learning new things all the time. I don't think there's a moment where I'm going to be like, oh, sweet, I got this. Like, it's just a huge thing.
Right. So here's what I'm curious about. So every time I talk to a serverless person or someone that has a serverless platform, or even when you go to a conference, I always hear, well, what are these things good for? Meaning, like, what types of apps can I build with these? You know, beyond like the serverless web API scenarios, which I think are probably the most common use cases that I've seen with serverless in general. Like, what other types of solutions have you seen people build? You know, not just on Begin, but just like with serverless in general. Like, what kind of things do we do with these?
Well, definitely it's like all about dynamic web apps, and I think like the front end community is really driving right now towards like realizing that static is not cutting it. I need a callback for that shopping cart, you know, and so like even for that just little tiny bit of functionality to integrate Stripe, you're not going to want to put those keys in the browser. You want to have that trusted background process, and so Cloud Functions are great for these use cases, and that's where the bread and butter is. People are doing some wild stuff out there though. So there are very massive machine learning workloads coming online now that the new temp disk is bigger. So people are using it to parallelize workloads that they formerly just couldn't do as quickly. So like video transcoding, I saw a demonstration of recently where, you know, normally it would take like an hour to transcode this big video between formats, but they just spawned like a billion Lambda functions and just did it all in parallel, and it happened in seconds. So that's a cool use case. We use WebSockets quite a bit, and this is something I have not written enough about. AWS figured out this really cool pattern where you can have a stateless application and functions, but they'll take care of the statefulness of the socket. And so all you got to do is write the glue code, and you don't have to worry about connections or retries or any of that junk. It's all there for you. So I'm kind of expecting games to increasingly become a thing. We have a friend who also recently did a demo for us where they are working with WebRTC and using the Amazon Sockety business that's out there. There is light at the end of the tunnel for the cold start thing too. So I think, more real-time applications are probably going to increasingly happen. But yeah, for me anyways, it's just for like sprinkling in just a little bit of dynamic functionality over that static thing. And then maybe thinking, maybe it's not necessary to be static, right? Like, I don't know, these things are so cheap and they're so fast. Like, why would I wait for the build step? Let someone else deal with that.
Right. Yeah, and if you don't believe us, you can probably believe the BBC, which finished converting all over their static website to a fully dynamic serverless thing over the past couple of years. So they're using exactly the same type of functional web pattern that we like to use as well. So it helps validate what we're doing.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it's a weird new world, and there's so many of these new primitives too. And I wouldn't like, we're very Lambda centric, we're very AWS-y. Like Cloudflare is obviously at the forefront of figuring out how to do this stuff with their workers and durable objects. Azure's been around for a while, and I haven't heard much from them in a minute, but I still think that they're a force, and they have their own kind of perspective and point of view about how this should work with their functions thing. Yeah. And I feel people should just explore and see what works for them, but I'd be surprised if there was a thing you couldn't build today serverlessly.
That's right. Okay. So with that being said, I'm kind of curious, like, what are some of the things that you and your team are planning for the future, specifically when it comes to Begin? Because so we see that obviously there's the AWS integration. We see that you could now start experiments with like that Deno runtime in there. I saw you do like some VI foo and like created the thing. I had to call it out because I know CJ is a big VI fan, so I know he uses VI a little bit. And then we saw like that
it's
really
funny
tight
because it
GitHub
looks
integration.
impressive, but the truth is I just can't use any other thing anymore. To keep like once you learn all these shortcuts, you're kind of like trapped. It's like a weird form of lock-in, muscle memory lock-in.
Yeah, I've accidentally seen Brian reboot a computer when trying to use VS Code. It's not pretty. So
it isn't. It's true. So we have a lot in our roadmap right now, and oh man, so we got really excited about. We realized that we were speaking not the right language. We were talking about serverless, but what we meant was functional web apps. So we shipped a site called fwa.dev recently to really start tearing apart the patterns of building with just pure functions. Yeah. So I'm personally really stoked about that, but it's kind of academic and it's a little bit boring. It's like taking functional programming ideas and applying it to cloud functions. So like one of the things that you can do in functional programming, if you have the same inputs and the same outputs, we call that pure. Purity allows for this concept called referential integrity, which means you can swap any two functions that meet the same contract. The same thing's true with a serverless application. So we can take say a node 18 Lambda function and turn that into a Deno function. And like we didn't have that capability before. You know, a Rails app, if you wanted to change something, you were changing everything kind of. And now we can like take constituent bits and pieces and move them around and change it. So you can expect to see more about functional web app from us. We also we've had a really tough relationship. Sorry, Steve, you're right. It's Deno, not Deno. I like how Steve's calling us out in this chat. It's awesome. So we have a weird relationship with static and Jamstack. Lots of people use serverless that are in this world, but this is very much a dynamic world. And so trying to figure out how to bridge these worlds has been a big point for us in the last year. We ourselves used React to build the first version of Begin, and then we migrated it over to Preact because it was getting kind of clunky and slow to work with. And then we migrated it to vanilla web components, and we're pretty stoked on that pattern. And we're actually looking to open source some work around that in the coming year. We're very early, but we think that the future will most likely be people writing to the browser. It's another reason I'm really excited about Deno because it's implementing direct browser APIs. And I imagine this future where I'm just writing for the browser. You know, I'm writing vanilla web components to web standards, and I'm publishing that stuff, and it's going to run forever because the browser runs forever, and I'm not chasing somebody else's roadmap or trying to upgrade code because somebody in my module ecosystem upgraded me. And yeah, so really jazzed about web components, and we're probably going to start having some strong opinions around how to approach your UI, and it's going to look shocking and strange, but I think that people are going to be pretty stoked. So it's not intuitive. You'd think us like we've been fairly back end focused, and we've always been very agnostic to the front end. But the front end has been a conveyor belt, and that conveyor belt just I want off. I don't care anymore. Like I don't need another component model. We've got one. It's standardized. Fine. I want to write code, ship it, and then write new code. I don't want to maintain code I already had and chase somebody else's idea of aesthetics. So yeah, those are some of the things that we're thinking about. Anything else, Simon, that we should hint at here?
I guess the CLI would be the other thing that we should talk about. So
right.
With that sounds important.
Yeah, the web UI is great and it helps people get started, but a lot of folks like to work on the command line, myself included. So being able to run the Begin CLI in order to create new apps, deploy, do anything that you would do from the web interface is going to be coming out before the end of the year as well.
Yeah, that's a big one. I can't believe I missed that.
You wrote most of it.
Maybe that's why.
I did write that code, didn't I? Yeah. That is mine.
We have a lot of that in our company. It's like, who wrote this? Oh wait, I wrote this.
That's funny. That's funny. Okay, so then I know when you showed us like that demo inside of your browser, like you're already set up and ready to go. But I'm going to assume that like all I need to do to get started with Begin, all I need to begin with Begin is just like a GitHub account, right?
That's
or
right.
Can I do it without a GitHub account, or do I need the GitHub account?
You need the GitHub account for now.
Okay.
We are just started looking at GitLab because we get past that every day. Yeah, I felt like that's the right way to do it. You know, most people are on GitHub, but there's a lot of developers on other platforms, so we're keeping an eye out to do more there.
You know, the thing I find is really interesting because I like to look at like the evolvability of how we do development over time. And you know, I feel like GitHub is more than just a company now. It's almost like a part of like developer culture. You know, it's like the expectation of, you know, you having something that, you know, you store your portfolio of work on. And so when you talk about like tying GitHub into like your workflow process, you're like, okay, well, I have the cloud and I have my source control thing, and then maybe I have like the cloud editor, like code spaces or Gitpod or the thing that I can code in that's not on my machine and not installed here. And so now your whole workflow doesn't exist on your machine anymore. Which now when you think about it, I find it makes it very accessible for people that don't have high-powered machines. You know, maybe I'm on a tablet, or maybe I just need to do a quick edit. And I need to spin up environments really quickly, and I need to deploy quickly. And I don't want to do the whole, you know, npm install the internet thing. Like I just want to go quickly and kind of get to it.
Yeah, totally. And that's sort of how I feel like the whole thing is moving. And the more of the automation is also moving into this. Like GitHub is definitely becoming this crazy platform with like Actions is a great example. Like that is a wonderful way to work. And writing a GitHub action, not so wonderful, but once it's written, they're wonderful.
Yeah, and that being said, recently we did release a couple of composite actions that make the building and the deploying of architect applications easier. You just include the composite action in your GitHub action. You don't have to worry about stuff. You just need the AWS environment variables to be shared secrets in your organization or in your project.
Yeah, those are great. I used those just a few weeks ago too. Thank you for writing those, Simon. I never want to write a GitHub action again.
I wasn't trying to take credit. I just was like
one character off in a YAML file. I can't see it. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And then it's like error line 2. It's like there's no error there.
or there's a copy and paste and there's an invisible character and it's like, oh, that's not valid YAML, and the whole thing blows up. I love that.
Oh my gosh. That caught me a couple of times, and I spent maybe like an hour trying to figure out like what's the problem with this code. I'm like, oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that sometimes the best thing to do is just to retype it so that it's like, oh yeah, there was a hidden character in there. Definitely.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Well, gentlemen, we're pretty much at about time now. We're at the top of the hour. Do you have any, you know, anything that you want to leave our audience with? Any takeaways? Any next steps, calls to action, things you want them to try out as we, you know, just before we close?
Yeah, tell them to, well, hi everyone. Go try out begin.com, check out arc.codes, check out fwa.dev. Somewhere in those 3 websites, you should be able to find Simon and I, either on Discord or Twitter. We are open source oldies and love helping. So, you know, don't hesitate to ask, bug me. Please file those issues and just let us know what's up. And we're always happy to help.
Awesome.
Yeah, I echo what Brian's saying. We're always here to help. So just please reach out in any of those different avenues.
Great. Well, gentlemen, again, thank you all so much for being here. And thank all of you that are still here and been hanging out with us for the past hour. We do dev chats every other Wednesday. We might change that soon, but for now, we're doing it every other Wednesday. So we hope that you join us again in another 2 weeks where we have more amazing guests talking about a lot of cool things that they're working on. So that being said, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you the next time for Stripe Dev Chats. Bye, everybody.